Live from Linguini's base of operations, today we will be diving into marketing inconveniences, featuring Jack Pierce from the Terror Tracks podcast, a challenge I'm considering doing, and a quote, so you're going to want to stay tuned for the dough. See you on the flip side.
You are now listening to Linguini's Dough.
Today we're featuring Jack Pierce from the Terror Tracks podcast, and he's an author. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
What's going on, everybody? I'm Jack Pierce. I've written 10 books now. My biggest selling one was Under a Morning Star, and the second biggest was The Suicide Diaries. And yeah, just check it out on Amazon. And I do a show called Terror Tracks where I teach you how to write horror novels now.
Go check those out. What's just a quick summary of Under the Morning Star?
Under a Morning Star is about a cop that goes back to his hometown, and he is trying to solve a mass murder case that happened. So it's almost like if you the easiest comparison I can give you is if you mixed Final Fantasy VIII with Silent Hill.
All right. Okay, so what's your favorite book you've written so far?
Probably Under a Morning Star, really. I mean, it was the first, and I think it was just the best one, not because it was the first, but you know, I think that some books I did later were better on a technical scale. Like I think the Snow White Murders was probably the best one on a technical level, but I think Under a Morning Star is just like, it's so psychotic and Jacob's Ladder that it never was really duplicated in anything else I ever did. So I always think that's the best one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, why do you like writing?
It's something to do, man. I mean, it's basically boiled down to, I wanted to make horror movies or horror video games, but I didn't have the money or the talent or the, cast or the acting ability or the patience or any of that. But, a pen and paper cost, $1 versus a camera that cost like 400 back in, before smartphones and all of that, where you could probably make a movie with an iPhone now, but, you couldn't do that back then. So.
And the imagination is limitless. Or I guess your limit is the imagination. What do you think you get inspired from writing?
It just sort of comes to you. It's kind of hard to explain where certain ideas come from. It's like you just be sitting there and then all of a sudden you just have this random, just insane idea pop in your head, and you're just, sometimes they grow and sometimes they don't. I'm actually going to be writing another one soon. I don't know what it's going to be called. It's basically going to be sort of like my take on the engine versus biosyn thing from Jurassic Park, but it's going to be in my universe where there's like, it's not dinosaurs, it's something different, but it's going to be like, two companies, there's like corporate espionage and stuff like that going on in the context of that world, where one Sky Blue that runs the Project Dreamer from a book called Dreamer, and the other one is this other corporation I got to come up with this trying to, tap into and sabotage their thing so they can take over that project that they're doing. So, or take over that space that they've inhabited.
Hopefully that goes well.
Yeah, I hope so. But I mean, the thing about writing books is like, you can have a billion ideas, but half of them won't end up on the shelf. I mean, you'll write something and you'll get about, 50 to even 100 pages in and say, nah, I just don't feel this. And you just scrap it and that's it.
Mm-hmm. You're like, this isn't it. Moving on. How often do you feel like let's say you scrap the book and then you start on a new one. How often does that process happen?
More often than not. I mean, it really has. I mean, I have a lot of books that just never went anywhere. I had one where I thought was a great idea, but I had no idea how to fill it out, which was one I called The Last Ride. It's on minds.com. I put it up as like a little 10-page short story so it went somewhere, just so it could be out there, where this old man is basically telling you his life story. And, the whole point was, he thought that he was going to be put into a rocket ship and blasted off into space and let go in space as a euthanasia program. And I just couldn't figure out a story to go around this simple concept of euthanasia in space. And I tried my best, but it just never happened.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I mean, you got a short story out of it at least,
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of neat. Like, what really happened was, you know, the guy tells a story about how the government's out to get him and the euthanasia program and all of that. And then, the next day it turns out that it was just that he was an Alzheimer's patient, and he just told the same story every day from some science fiction magazine he read. And I thought that was a pretty dark ending. I like my dark endings. I don't think any of my endings are happy. I don't think any book I've ever written ended well
You're like
for
this.
everybody.
I'll have to read one. I haven't quite got there yet, but I'll have to read one. When you're writing a story, do you have like a mental roadblock within those first few sentences you write, or is it more filling in the story kind of as you write, getting the details more accurate, being harder? If that made sense.
I think the block, what you're asking, is writer's block. I think what really happens is some stories just happen. Like, I'll just be able to crank out like 50 pages in a day, and some stories I can't crank out, a paragraph. Just
Mm-hmm.
certain stories just don't work. And it's not that there is something wrong with the story. It's just that some stories just don't have that spark. They don't have that growth spurt that happens, and a lot of times, those are the ones that fail. Like I said, like, The Last Ride and a few others that I've done, they just did not have that spark. I was gonna do like a sequel, sort of modern take on 1984, that didn't work either, and that got about 50 pages in, and I just kind of quit, and it just didn't work out for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really kind of random. I mean, it's not ever the first few sentences though. It's always, like 20 to 50 pages in the book, and that's when it just sort of is, the make or break with that. I usually get like a good couple first chapters, and then it's like, usually I'll get stumped and that's it.
Mm-hmm. You'll move on. And do you plan, so when you're going about your day, do you plan specific times to write, or is it when you get that spark that you're talking about that you go ahead and write?
It's usually when I get that spark.
So you're an author, so I take it you read other people's writing as well. And does that help get you that spark as well?
I think so, in a bit. It's not really I don't really get the spark from other people's writings, but I do read a lot, and anything from creepy pasta to short stories to, not as much with novels, because it's just such a time sink. I have so much going on in my real life that I don't have the time to actually sit down and read, a Stephen King The Stand or something like that. I mean, the only way I'd ever listen to the only way I'd ever hear the entire thing is just, to listen to an audible version. I
Mm-hmm.
can't sit down and read a 1,000-page novel. It's just never going to happen. My ADD is way too bad.
Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of
But I
time.
can, yeah, I just can't do that. It's just no way.
Mm-hmm. So just out of curiosity, how do you like manage the story details? Because you write down, let's say 20 to 50 pages, and just how do you get those details fine tuned to make it into something longer?
I always thought of it as sort of each chapter is like a short story in and of itself, and each chapter after that is like a sequel to that, like what happens next sort of thing. Since I write my books more like you would write a TV show or a movie, it's more like, instead of thinking, how do I make this longer? It's like, think about when you're watching a TV show or a movie, you have your opening scene where you introduce the characters or whatever you do in the first opening scene of whatever your movie's going to be. And then after that scene is over, you always leave a scene on what happened next. Like the question, not saying at the end of a saying, ending each one with a question, but you leave it in your own mind of what happened after that, and then you write that story, and then what happened after that. You do that on and on and on until it's finally like, all right, this story's done.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you basically are writing, instead of thinking of I need to write 400 pages, you should be thinking more like I need to write 50 short stories that all are sequels to each other. That's
Mm-hmm.
the first chapter.
And they keep a focus on like those characters that you write about as well.
Yeah.
How about the revision process? Because I'm sure that's one of the major factors into writing your books. And how does that look like for you?
The editing process is the asshole of publishing.
Oh
That's
man.
I hate editing. It's the worst thing on earth. If I had the money, I would pay someone $1 million to never have to edit again. I hate editing. It is terrible.
Mm-hmm. And you have to do it, sadly.
Just oh my god, I mean, I know that you do audio editing, so I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, where it's like, you listen to the thing and it's like, oh, there's a screw up here, and then you have to cut it out and make sure it fits well, and splice these two things together to make it sound natural, and then it's just on and noise. It's basically the same thing with writing, but with words instead of audio. I mean, it's even worse because I have to listen. I basically put the text into a text-to-speech reader, and it reads it to me like an audio book, and I'll listen to it, and if I hear something that doesn't sound smooth, then I have to stop the tape and rewrite that sentence, and then start the tape again and listen to the sentence, and on and on and on for 400 pages. It's just I hate it.
It's a time consuming. Yeah.
By the end of the book, you hate your book. Like I hate every single book I've written. I hate the newest book I put out 2 days ago so bad that I don't even want to market it. I don't even want to look at it ever again. It was, that's just how you feel about a book after you looked at it so much at a critical level where you're just every single word has to fit, and it's just a perfectionism, and it just like, the editing part of the process is the part that makes you say, you know what? I don't want to be an author anymore. I want to quit. I want to do something else. I'd rather shovel elephant crap than do this. At least with that, I don't have to stop every second and check each turd in the pile. I mean, good
just toss
God,
it in.
It's horrible.
It's definitely a tough process, and the hard part is knowing that you have to release it, because otherwise you'll just throw it in the dumps if you don't after listening to it 1,000 times. And
yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about K is Away. Is I just kind of forced it out, because if I didn't force it out, it was never going to come out, and it was 403 pages. That it was sort of like I fell to the sunk cost fallacy, but I don't think it's anywhere near as good as my other stuff. And I'm willing to admit that I've written some turds that I think are turds anyway, but some people might like them. Because you never know what the audience is going to like, which is the hardest thing about being an author. Is you always think that if I write this type of book with this type of plot, with these type of characters, with the structure, with all this stuff, the people are going to love it. You could literally take a famous book like Harry Potter and just change the names and nothing else, and someone would probably hate your book.
That's
even
true.
If they knew nothing about Harry Potter, they probably would still hate your book anyway.
And leave a 1-star review saying
it's completely random. I mean, I thought the Suicide Diaries was my worst book, period. I hated that book. And it became my second bestseller. I mean, the books I love didn't do that well. Like, I love Dreamer and I love the Snow White Murders. I think they're my best books, and nobody cared.
I don't understand why that's the case. It just, people, I guess the audience chooses. So
I mean, you just can't understand the audience. You never can. I mean, if any author could understand the audience, then there'll be more famous works by J.K. Rowling than Harry Potter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because J.K. Rowling's written so many books that are not Harry Potter, but you've never heard of any of them. I mean, you know what I mean? She caught fire with one book and then made a series out of it, but she's written so much other stuff that if she knew how to make another Harry Potter, something as famous as that, she would have.
She would have done it in an instant.
She doesn't know. Nobody knows.
At least she's built up that audience that somewhat, she got the first 1,000 followers, I guess.
Oh, that's so difficult too. Just getting 1,000 followers. I mean, that's just, that's a nightmare. And honestly, it never gets easier when it comes to marketing your book. I don't care how many you've sold. It's pulling teeth to get every single sale.
Especially knowing
you never get popular enough unless you're Stephen King. Even he probably has issues. You never get popular enough where you have to stop marketing. And the way I've explained it to people, because people have this notion that I'm going to become a famous author and never have to do this advertising stuff again. And I'm like, Coke and Pepsi both advertise on the Super Bowl of all things. That's a very expensive ad. Coke and Pepsi, there's no one on earth that doesn't know what Coke or Pepsi is, that they exist in probably every flavor they come in, but they still have to advertise.
And they have advertising literally everywhere. What type of environment do you write in? Like, is it in a studio, office, or do you prefer just writing when the idea comes to you?
I have a desktop PC at the office and I have one at the house.
Oh, okay.
Both houses have a 50-inch TV, which they're both plugged into. So I'm always working with a big giant screen, and I have a wireless keyboard and a recliner that I sit in anytime I write something. I don't have any other chairs in the house. I don't have office chairs except for one in the front office when I'm working on something, but the rest of the time I'm always in a recliner. So, I have them all over the place. I always have to have one around.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a Southern thing. I don't know if it's just a man thing, but there's no seat that's like a recliner. I'm in one right now.
Oh, look at
So,
that. Gotta be
yeah, so a
comfortable when you do it.
recliner, a nice, gaming PC, a giant TV, as the monitor. That's how I write.
All part of a complete collection. So I know the revision is your least favorite part of writing a story. What are your other parts that kind of, or you don't like doing when it comes to writing?
The marketing part is a pretty big headache because
for
you
sure.
almost have to make it your life. You really do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's almost, see, back in the day, if you'll let me, digress for a second about a different type of marketing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which you're probably more familiar with, which is like YouTube and podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with books, but it's a lot harder because, with podcast, YouTube, music, anything audio or video, it's a lot more of a passive medium where you could, listen in the background. And I know that the audiobooks exist, that's fine, but how many people listen to audiobooks versus listen to, music, which is a lot more passive.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through this phase when I was on YouTube for many years because I've been on YouTube since 2008, and I've had various levels of success on YouTube. And, I've had various ups and downs with it and all sorts of different phases of my YouTube career. Now I've just started another venture, of course, because I just can't stop for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, there used to almost be like this unspoken rule that you shouldn't ever, say like, comment, subscribe, or ask someone to, donate to your Patreon, or, if you're making money, you're a sellout, or you're a shill, or you have to, basically struggle, and, you should get a real job. And, after a while, you're like, wait a minute, I paid, like, you have that microphone that you use is $400. I paid $400 for this microphone. Whatever I paid for this microphone stand, and this desk and this computer that I have to, I have to pay for the editing software, if you're using the Adobe Premiere, or you have all this investment, but you're not supposed to make anything back from it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And you work your butt off for it, and it's...
Yeah, and I finally got to the point of, you know what? If someone can't listen to me say, the single words like, comment, subscribe, donate to Patreon, and listen to like, a 20-second bit, so that they can get more content that they want from me for free, then I just don't need them.
Yeah, I see that. And and if you don't mention it, the people that would support you won't even remember to. So even though it's even though it's kind of like a weird thing to say, I guess people don't like it, it does help, even if we don't like to admit it does.
You kind of have to, and it's just one of those things. I've been kind of slacking on that with the podcast, even though I've kind of gotten overboard with some of the more recent episodes because I have so much stuff going on. Like I have, all these different social media sites and all these different ways to donate and all these different ways of this, that, and the other. You have to tell them about everything. So what I've done to make it easier is I've made like a link tree sort of thing where it has like, I have a link tree for all the stuff to support the show. And then I have one where you can follow me on these different social media sites. And I'll use my website like terratracks.com with, a different subdomain, more or less. That way, instead of having to say, donate on Patreon, do this, and like show 5 different ways to support the show and show like 10 different social media sites and explain everything about each social media site, I'll just say, go to this site to support the show, go to this site to follow the show, and then you're done. People,
nice and simple.
It's gonna pass them by if you try to rattle off, I do this on Instagram, I do this on Minds, I do this on Twitter, on Facebook, and Pinterest, and whatever else is out there, and I'm on YouTube, and if you want to watch this version of that, and it's just there's one guy that does that, and I can see how it irritates people because he doesn't organize it in a nice little bow. That's a simple way to put it, which is not Filthy Frank, Philip DeFranco. Getting my
Mm-hmm.
Franks mixed up. He does that where he'll spend like 5 minutes just shilling all this different stuff, and I'm just like, oh my god, Phil, just give me a link and I'll go look and see if I want to look at any of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure he's a millionaire, I get it, but I would personally feel bad if I sat there and spent like 5 minutes of just, selling you a car on every single video. It just wouldn't feel right. I'd be
It gets
like,
old.
if I heard that from someone else, like on a podcast, I would just probably wouldn't listen.
Okay. Well, what are your favorite steps in the writing process?
Honestly, I don't know what it is. I don't even think I like writing anymore. I loved it when I first started, and it's sort of like hard to explain. Like you have your day job.
Mhm.
You liked it at first. You thought it was all right. Or maybe you didn't, but you'll get this day job that's good enough and it pays enough, and you do well enough and you get comfortable with it, and eventually it just sort of becomes like a routine versus a passion becomes a routine. It's like, oh well, I got this idea, I'm going to write this stuff down, and here's another book. And I don't think I've ever celebrated or felt like some type of joy or elation or euphoria from releasing a book. It was almost always, thank God that's over. Well, I got to write another one because that one's going to flop.
Yep.
And then you just go and write another one.
The process that's fun.
It can be,
Mhm.
9 books again it was, but it's just what I am at this point, I guess is the way to put it. It's just, it's not something that brings me incredible joy or, you know, pain either. It's what I do.
Mhm.
It's just part of who I am. I'm a writer. I write. That's how I feel about it at this point.
How long has been your longest gap without writing? Out of curiosity.
I think probably 6 months.
6 months. Were you by the time you
Probably.
started writing again? Were you like all refreshed and ready to?
Not really. Not really.
It just kind of
I
happened
think
naturally.
not really. No, I think Under a Morning Star damn near killed me. I mean, it was rough. That was a really hard one to start with because I wanted to write the best horror novel of all time. I wanted to write something that was perfect. That was, I
Oh
thought that
yeah.
Stephen King and all these people, they put out these books and they're so perfect and there's nothing wrong with them. And that's how you sell a book is it has to be, crystal clear, perfect, nothing wrong with it at all. And I just pulled my hair out and I just hated writing that book. And I've edited it even after release. I have revised that thing
Oh my
probably
goodness.
10 times after release when Grammarly would get an update and they'd be like, oh, we found more problems now. And I would literally go and edit all of the books again.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'm OCD, but it's like, I want the perfect product. And I know that there's no way I'm ever going to have the perfect product. And I'm sure that the reader does not see this stuff, but to me, it's like the easiest review to avoid is, this book needs an editor. That's
Mhm.
the easiest one to avoid. And reviews are so difficult to get. They're almost impossible to get. They really are. Think about the last time you bought something on Amazon and then went and reviewed it on Amazon.
Especially if it was a good product, because usually good ones you just kind of are like, these are good, and then move on.
Yeah, I mean that's how it is with books. It's just a nightmare to get a review. So, and then Amazon also puts up these roadblocks where it's like, well, you have to, have $50 on your account, and you have to have this type of account, and you've had to have the account for this amount of time, and just all these roadblocks where it's like someone that just bought your book and that's it, and just started their Amazon account can't review it.
Mhm.
So and then what they'll do is Amazon will be like, if you review too many products, whether it's books or anything, you review a certain amount of products in a certain amount of time, and they don't tell you this, they'll ban your reviewing privilege and they'll take all your reviews down.
Are
So
you
I've had it where
serious?
I think Under a Morning Star at its peak had like over 100 reviews. Now it's down to like 16.
Oh my goodness, that is kind of messed up, Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I used to think that, like, if you see a book and has a lot of reviews, it must be a famous, book that got a lot of reviews. And I'm thinking, then I realized later down the road, a book that has no reviews, probably hasn't sold anything. But if they have at least 3 or 4, I think that you can have a decent bet that they've at least sold 1,000 copies. And I see some of these people that have 1,000 reviews on their book, and I've never heard of them. And it makes me kind of question if they went to like some type of website where you can, buy reviewers, and Amazon eventually finds that out, and they always do because they're very anal about reviews, and they'll end up banning your account. There goes your book, and there goes all that money you spent to buy fake reviews. You really can't buy fake reviews. They used to be able to do that on Fiverr, I think, but they made it like illegal, and I think it's actually illegal to buy fake reviews on Amazon. It's like, I forgot what it was, like consumer fraud or something. You get in trouble with the I think it's the FTC or something if you ever bought fake testimonials on something. So I mean, do you really want to get hit with all these fines and everything, or lose all that stuff, or do you want to just have to eat the bullet at the fact that you're not gonna have that many reviews? And I think reviews, they mean a little bit to people, but I think most of the time, if your cover's good, your title's good, and the description sounds interesting, they'll pick it up. Because I've had books with no reviews that have done better than books with 10 reviews in certain seasons. It's kind of crazy. So it's really just random. Like, I don't think there's any way to predict what book's going to sell, and there's no method you can use to figure out what would make a book sell or sell better. It's just kind of luck no matter what. It's sort of like, when you're doing YouTube and everything, you can say, well, I have this perfect interview that I'm going to set up, which I saw one last night with a different podcast, which was a guy that I don't remember the name of the podcast, unfortunately, but he was reviewing the voice actor that did Leon Kennedy for the new Resident Evil 2 remake. And I was thinking, well, this guy's super famous, and that, game sold 2 or 3 million copies. This will be something that probably had to get, a decent amount of views, and only got like 200 views.
Oh, wow. That's,
and I'm just like, that's nuts. It's like, what if you interviewed Trump and you only got like 100 views? I mean, how would that feel? You know what I mean?
you get
so like, you get these super famous people that everyone knows, or, and you just get them on your show, and YouTube just like, nah, we're just not going to let you have it. And that's how Amazon is. It's like, if you went to Amazon right now and typed in Under a Morning Star, you would have to put my author name too in the search for it to pop up. And I'm thinking to myself, but none of the results are Under a Morning Star. There's no other book called this. So why is it, that extra step to see my book that's called that? So, I mean, even Amazon, their search algorithm is screwing you. So it's basically luck. I mean, it's, I feel like advertising on Amazon, especially, and I did talk about this in a recent episode that's not come out yet. It comes out, and one came out yesterday. It's not the 9th. It's going to be on the 16th. It's part 8, where I talked about how to sell more copies. And what happens is, damn, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, I feel like Amazon ads are basically like gambling at this point. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, all of these social media sites, absolutely worthless for, selling a book. In my opinion, there was a guy, and this is a little bit of a, off the trail for a second, but it does have a point. There was a boxer, and I don't remember who it was. It wasn't like George Foreman or anybody like that, but it was a, relatively well-known boxer. And he had, I think it was 1.5 million followers on Twitter. And he went and wrote some book about boxing. I don't know if it was his career or how to box or something. He wrote something about boxing. So you have a boxer that has 1.5 million followers on a Twitter profile that's all about boxing. And he wrote a book about boxing, and he promoted it with just his Twitter, figuring that, it's all lined up. He sold 300 copies.
Oh my goodness. That's
what I mean? So at that point, I was like, social media is worthless. At least for books, it is absolutely just nothing. There's no need in this, because I finally came to realize you don't buy books on Twitter, you buy books on Amazon.
That's true. Especially because they have Audible as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Out of a curiosity for another marketing struggle that you might have is because I noticed when I searched your name in Google, it popped up with some other person with the same name. How does that make it harder for you?
I have the unfortunate gift of being named. I don't know if after, but I was named after apparently a makeup artist that did Frankenstein's makeup back in the 30s.
Yeah.
So if you look for me, you see that. And I'm like, well, I'm not 100 and something, so it's just unfortunate. But it's difficult. Even if I was the only Jack Pierce in the world, there would be, some type of struggle with that because it's just, you can't really figure out what the machine wants and how to feed it. You know what I mean? And the reason they do that, the reason they make it so obscure with how the system works and how you could succeed within the YouTube system, the Google system, the Amazon system, whatever search engine, the reason that they make it so difficult to succeed is because they know that you will throw more money at it to try and succeed.
Wow.
They know that you will test all these different theories trying to see which one of these is going to work. And to test it, it costs money.
Kind of like gambling.
Yeah, it's really advertising is gambling. It really is, especially, cost per click is absolutely gambling. And that's what it was with Amazon, where the preview for part 8 of Terror Tracks is the fact that, let's say, you're like, okay, well, all this social media doesn't work, so I'm just going to go and do some Amazon ads. Well, that's when you start gambling and playing roulette, because what ends up happening is you'll say, okay, I want my book to be the top, result or one of the top results of horror. Like, you type in horror into the search bar and, you'll pop up with your book, in the Kindle section. Along with others, of course, that it's not going to be just you, but you'll have your roll of the dice for that.
They won't have to browse through 1,000 pages just to find it.
Yeah, so you'll be at the top of the search, a certain amount of the time, like randomly, I guess. So to be at the top of the search, though, you have to pay like $1 per click, though. Your book is $10. You make $6 or $7 from the book. You're gambling, hoping that out of every 6 clicks, you get a purchase, which you probably won't. So
No.
it really is gambling. That's gambling to me. Is I'm throwing money at something, hoping that I get a return, and I usually don't.
I have a question. So if someone were to keep clicking, like they opened up that ad multiple times, does it charge you for every dollar? It does?
Yep.
Oh, that is scary.
And that's why I stopped doing it.
You're like, I got to find different ways to market this. And with books, that is extremely hard because it just takes so much time to read books that a lot of people don't even bother, I guess.
It's difficult because there's so many options now, because before, KDP and Ingram Spark and all of that, where you could do it by yourself, you have publishers who had all that money behind them, had all these, backroom deals with all these different stores. They had, connections. They were the ones that filtered out the good from the bad books. There was, if a book came up from Penguin Random House or, whoever, the publisher would be like, these big publishers. You could kind of, almost guarantee the book would at least be good. You wouldn't think it would be horrible, because they wouldn't get through the actual traditional publishing process, which is a nightmare. But you would think they had like a filter, but now it's sort of like YouTube. You're competing with millions of other books, trying to stand out, and no one really cares about the publisher anymore. I mean, and traditional publishers are kind of worthless now. They really are. In my opinion, they are. And anyone that says they're not is, they have a problem, apparently. There's something wrong with you if you think that you should go to a traditional publisher at this point. I mean, it's sort of like if you were, it's not like the music industry, you could do independent now if you have the money to put behind it. But a traditional publisher really at this point is just a money leeching middleman. They don't do anything for your marketing. They don't do anything for you besides give you an editor and a cover designer. And, there's no guarantee that your book is going to sell because you still have to market your book. And now you're making 8 to 12% on the, cover price of it versus 70% you can make on, your own independently. So it boils down to, do you want to have to go through all the headache and years of getting an agent and then having the agent field it to these different people and then having to deal with, they want to make all these changes to your book that could be better or worse to the story. And they interfere and they just get in the way and all of that. And you only get 8 to 12%, and you have to, they don't give you money to market it either. You have to use your own money. So at this point, I'm just thinking to myself, what's the point of a traditional publisher if they do nothing for you except for give you, some random Indian on Fiverr that'll make you a cover, which you could pay for yourself for $5 to $10. I know that's terrible to say that, but I've done it before. At least in the early stages, I did.
Yeah.
Now I work with a girl from England that does it, and I pay her a decent wage. But I mean, when you're first starting out, you don't know, what you're doing, so you can field it with that, or try with that sort of thing. But the point is, there's really no reason for a traditional publisher to exist at this point. They're just not. I mean, you can pay an editor. Editors are expensive, but if you really think about it, is it worth going through all the headache to get their editor that's probably overworked and that's probably isn't really paying that much attention to your book to begin with?
Yeah, kind of sounds like the publishers are just kind of a scam. I didn't know that much about publishers, so I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a lot of sneaky things they do, and there's no guarantee your book's even going to do well, especially now because the internet.
The problem is the publishers used to be the only way to get your book out there, unless you were, self-publishing, which I don't know how they did it before KDP. So, I mean, you can look it up yourself. I'm not sure, but I'm sure it was a whole lot harder to do it before then. So everyone thought that the only way to get out there is the traditional publisher, which it pretty much was. It's sort of like when you look at these artists, that do like, music. It used to be the only way that you could get on the radio or get out there, in public is to go through some type of, record company.
Mm-hmm.
And the record company would just screw you left and right. I mean, they were just as bad as the publishers where, let's say, I don't know, off the top of my head, I remember Winger had this problem. If you know that band, I'm not sure if you ever listened to them, but, they would sell a CD for, I guess, $10-15. They get 50 cents per CD.
Is that a relatively good return?
No,
okay, sorry.
$15 for the CD, and they get 50 cents per CD sold.
Oh yeah, that's bad.
And on top of that, their money they have to pay the record company, from their own royalties for the recording cost. It's like the record company doesn't even foot the bill for the producer or the recording time or studio time. None of it. So all it really was the record company was there to leech off of you too, because how are you going to get it out there otherwise?
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that distributed the CDs and had the deals with the factories and stuff, but did some of the marketing, I guess, but all of it came out of your end. It didn't come out of their end at all. They have this, I don't know if you could probably look it up. I can't remember what it's called, but there was this documentary I watched, and I'm not a big rap fan, but it was really interesting to see how they do it.
Yeah.
And what they would do is they would take these young men from low income areas, and what they would do is, if they had any amount of rapping talent, they sign them to these horrible deals where they would get nothing. And they're basically, the guy would get out there and he'd sell, at most like 500,000 copies, and they end up owning the record company like $1 million or something, and he was just massively in debt.
And it would all be on a contract, I'd imagine.
Getting these poor people that didn't read their contracts and thought this is their way out of that low income area, and they just screwed them, and now they're, in debt for more than a house, and that's it. That's how a lot of those rappers are. A lot of those rappers, they don't have these fancy houses and cars and all that stuff. That's all rented for the music video, which comes out of their end, of course.
I never even knew how messed up those industries were, just for, competition and just kind of how they play it. Kind of curious, how do you said you hire someone now from England that does your cover art?
Yeah.
So one couple years back, my language arts teacher, she said, do judge a book by its cover. I'm paraphrasing. Do judge a book by its cover. The author puts a lot of work into what you see. What would be your thoughts on that?
Everyone judges a book by its cover. I don't care what anyone says. You do. I mean, you judge everything by its appearance, at least up front. If you think about it, it's like the same with women. It's the same with movies. Titles and covers and stuff of like the front of a DVD and all of that. It's like it's sort of like think about thumbnails. Like, you have to have the fancy thumbnail for someone to click on your video. They're judging your video by the thumbnail that you put on it. I mean, people do judge a book by its cover. It doesn't matter. You could have the worst book on earth, but if you have a good title and a good cover and a blurb that makes, it just moves mountains, it will sell like hotcakes, and it'll probably get horrible reviews, but the thing sold.
You got the profit.
You can market it. Like, think about the pet rock. You can market a rock, and it was like one of the best-selling toys of all time.
I wish I could have bought that.
Yeah.
Even though it's literally just a rock. Okay, I guess going back to the whole book process, I guess when you don't reach your goals for a book, how does that make you feel? Or how does it affect you?
I don't have goals for my books at all.
You don't? Okay, so you just kind of...
Because once again, you don't know what the audience is going to want. And I feel like books are not, I mean, they're products, of course, to be sold, but I feel like they're not really like video games or movies where you have a box office, sort of thing that you're trying to say, like a movie comes out and here's the box office draw and all of that stuff. I don't think books really work like that, because I think books are a lot more evergreen, unless you're doing like a topical thing, like, a political book or, some type of, science thing or something like that, where it's a lot more topical.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I wrote a book about COVID, that would have a window of like, a couple years of whenever this is going to be over, if it's ever over. I have that window that this book is relevant and sellable. But for me, since I'm a fiction author, it really doesn't have one. And what I've noticed was the Suicide Diaries did not move mountains at all. Like when it first came out, it didn't sell nothing. And, I think Unreal Morning Star came out and it hit the charts at #1 in October, which was 6 months after it came out. So, or maybe 6 months. So it came out in June and then it blew up in October, whatever the amount of time between those two is. But the point is, you never know when a book is going to blow up. It's almost like, a landmine. You put them out there and you hope someone steps on the thing. And that's what happens with some of them. Some of them just never get found. And, you can put all the money and, all the work you can into these things, and some just don't work. I thought the Suicide Diaries wasn't going to go anywhere. And next thing you know, one day it sold, 800 copies during the Halloween season. I think it was Halloween 2019. And, it just sold 800 copies in a week and went to #1. And it's like, well,
I don't mind.
It just happens. You just never know. It's like, like certain books, you'll put them out and you'll think, oh, this is going to be my big one. And then it doesn't sell nothing. And then a year later, you look back and like, wait a minute, this thing has like 10 reviews. Where'd that come from? And, you look at all your numbers, you're like, well,
I mean, it worked.
That happened.
Yeah.
Just sometimes, like, it just gets a miracle that, happens. The Holy Ghost just grabs it and says, this is great. And then it explodes, and you just never know. It's sort of like, I've always thought about, the books is more like planting seeds and hoping the tree grows versus trying to, make an explosive thing out of the gate, because me can do that. And that'd be great if I could just throw out a book and get, 100,000 copies sold and get rich. But you just can't, unless your name is Stephen King or J.K. Rowling. And as I said, even with her, she had books that, did okay, but nowhere near Harry Potter, which, made her a billionaire. And R.L. Stein has been doing the same thing, where he's written I don't know when he started or if it's a new thing or an old thing or what, but he's the one that did Goosebumps for, all those years. And I don't know if he still does it or not, but he wrote all the Goosebumps books. And he wrote another series, which was like, I don't know if it's a series or just a book, but it's called Fear Street, I think. And that's like a more adult, sort of novel or series that he's working on now. But I guarantee you Fear Street is never going to sell as much as Goosebumps, even though it's R.L. Stein. And I'm sure that Stephen King has his, handful of books, like 5 to 10 books out of the 60 novels he's written or whatever, that are like his sellers, and most people just sort of pass over the rest of the stuff. Like off the top of my head, I'm just going to say that, probably his best-selling one right now would probably be The Stand or It or maybe The Shining, stuff like that. Like, the main ones that you still hear horror fans talking about is probably what's selling. But, you never hear anyone talk about like the Tommyknockers or the Duma Key or, Christine or Maximum Overdrive. You never hear anyone talk about any of those. So Stephen King makes $10 million a year off book royalties alone, from what I heard. And he's worth over $400 million, I think, which is just insane. But I mean, he also gets royalties from movies and TV shows and all sorts of, merchandise that he's made and, all sorts of stuff. So he's making money. I think most of an author's money, honestly, probably doesn't come from book sales. It probably comes from the merchandise. Like if you think about it, like all the Harry Potter posters, the video games, the movie, the movies that J.K. Rowling, that they made of those things, all the toys, all the lunch boxes with Harry Potter on it, the little notebooks with him on it. I think that's where the vast majority of an author's money comes from. And the same thing for, musicians, that most of it comes from merchandise, whereas all that extra stuff that's, just accessories to things, that's where they make the money, I think. I mean, because if you think about it, I don't know, I don't have a calculator in front of me, but 12%, which is the highest you'll ever get from a traditional published author, and that's from Brandon Sanderson, who wrote that Mistborn series. He said this 12% is the top. If your book is $20, what's 12% of $20? It's what, like, I can't think off the top of my head. Not much. Not much. Maybe 50 cents or a buck. You sell 1 million copies of it, that's not going to make you a billionaire.
No. I guess by becoming the person selling the royalties, you become the middleman. After going through middlemen to publish.
And I think that one band I always go back to that kind of, embodies the whole, selling the main art is not how you really make the money, is Kiss. If you think about Kiss, Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons both worth, almost $500 million, but almost all of the records only sold like 1 million copies per record. They were never, diamond certified like the Eagles or Bon Jovi or anything. But, everyone had a Kiss lunchbox. Everyone had the action figures or the DVDs, the movies, just, everything had Kiss on it when they were big. And that's how they made their money and still make their money. They have over 3,000 pieces of merchandise that are related to Kiss, all the way from coffins to condoms, which is actually true.
Wow.
You can get a Kiss condom, you can get a Kiss coffin.
What else do you need?
And I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. I've always thought you should never close off an avenue to make money. As long as you're, you're not hurting anyone. It's sort of like where people, I think it was some interviewer was getting really snooty with Paul Stanley from Kiss and asked him, are you ever going to make a Kiss toaster? And he says, well, if people will buy it, why not? It's sort of like people are like, well, I'm just going to sell on Amazon and nothing else. Why? I mean, what if Amazon goes under, which won't happen? What if Amazon bans you? You know what I mean?
What if, the audience wants something different?
Yeah, you may not get 1 million if you sell 1 million copies on Amazon, you may only sell a few thousand on Barnes and Noble, but that's a few thousand you didn't have before. So, I mean, I just don't see the point in trying to cut off anything, even though I kind of have, because I can't sustain working with trying to upload the podcast to everything from Dailymotion to Rumble to Odyssey to BitChute to all these different different video sites that have these different algorithms and different interfaces, and some of them can't automate anything, and you have to go through all this process to get all this stuff done. Because because I think you use Anchor, don't you, for your podcast?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so I use Anchor too for mine, and with Anchor, we both know, and maybe the audience doesn't know this, is when you put the podcast on Anchor, it shoots it out to all these like 10 different websites automatically. If you do an update to it, it updates to all the sites where you don't have to do anything except for, focus all your energy on just putting it on Anchor, and they handle the rest. It's syndication, basically. But there's no way to do that with YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Dailymotion, Vimeo, all these other sites. Rumble, you have to do this stuff manually, and that's a full-time job, because you know how hard it is just to have a YouTube channel grow, let alone 4 other sites that most people have never heard of.
And you have to watch all these in their analytics and see where you can do better. Yeah. It's crazy.
There's no aggregator. There's no syndication software out there that can shoot it out there, because all the systems are different. All of them, have different fields of input. Some of them flat out do not, have scheduling features like YouTube, which is the big deal breaker for me with Daily Motion. And maybe it wasn't Daily Motion. Rumble I know does, but I know BitChute doesn't. Odyssey, I'm not getting into why I don't like Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. That's drama, which we don't want to talk about on the show. We can talk about that off air if you want, but I don't like Odyssey, and I am not, basically, I'm not going to work with a site that does not give me the ability to make things as simple as possible, because, your show is all about productivity, and the way to be productive is to organize everything and make it as automated as possible.
I was just talking to a guest yesterday about productivity. He's like, keeping stuff simple is the best way about going about it. Once it gets complex, you're going way out of line and it's just going to hurt you.
Yeah, because if you you got to focus on what works. And the thing that helped me a lot with the decision to get rid of Rumble and BitChute and Daily Motion on all of them, and Instagram, I'm not going to post it over there either. Well, I might, because Instagram is actually stable, is because, number one, the sites are unstable. You don't know when they're going to go out. I got burned so bad when I was doing live streams on a site called Stream Me. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It's dead now. And it was this site that had just exploded, and everyone that went over there was like a gold rush, basically. And some drama popped up with some creator who was just a bad person, and still is a bad person. Once again, drama, not going to get into it, but he basically had the entire site go down, and it never came back.
And you lost everything you worked for on it.
And I lost everything I worked for. And had the same thing happen with another what they call alt tech site called VidMe, which they all of a sudden decided to close up shop without telling anybody anything. So they just went kaboom, and that was it. All your hard work was gone from there with no warning, no, apology, no nothing. So that was gone. And, there's just so many websites that they start and the people just don't know what they're doing, or they get over their head, or they just get ideologically screwed up one way or another, where it's just, I'm not going to go into the political part of that, but you get what I mean. People get screwed up one way or another, where the website becomes unsustainable and then it just collapses. And that's why I'm not really a big fan of alt tech, because it's just unstable. Like Gab was supposed. Remember Gab? I don't know if you know Gab.
I don't think I do.
This free speech Twitter alternative they ended up basically being a conservative hug box, which I'm not against conservatives. Once again, no politics. But it became a conservative hug box where the owner would basically ban anybody that he disagreed with politically or morally. So what are they bringing to the table that Twitter doesn't? You know what I mean? You're bringing me an inferior product that has the same problem as the big product.
Exactly.
So there's no reason to use it, and then the site ends up collapsing. So that's I don't know how we got this far off topic, but that's the point. Is you need to since this is about productivity, we can bring this back to that. You need to invest in what works. And, you can have your moral stance against YouTube and think that they're run by terrible people with terrible ideas, terrible ideologies, whatever you want to think. But YouTube works. If you went to a random person on the street right now and said, "Hey, I have a great podcast, talk about productivity. If you listen to it, you can organize your entire life, a lot less stress, a lot less, get more done. It'll change your life." And they're like, "Okay, well, where can I see it?" And you say it's on BitChute, and they'll look at you like you're crazy.
You're like,
because most people have never heard of BitChute.
No
normal people. You know what I mean?
And people don't want to go out of their way to go find it.
Yeah.
When you have YouTube where it's installed on literally every device.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, these sites have merit, and I get it. I want competition, and I want people to succeed in their ventures, but at this point, I really don't think it's possible to, create a site that could beat YouTube. You know,
YouTube isn't even a profitable site. It's just Google has the market share.
No video site is. You can't, because there's no way to scale it.
Storage is
You know,
expensive.
you always need more storage, and you're not going to bring in enough money to pay for said storage.
And you have to pay the people that are making the site even work.
Yeah. It's not a profitable venture. It wasn't for the original creators of YouTube because, you know, they sold out to Google for whatever amount they gave. I think it was 1.6 billion or something, but you know, they sold out to to Google, who I think originally, and don't quote me on this, they had something called Google Video that wasn't as successful. And then Google Video and YouTube merged just to be YouTube. And I mean, because I've been around since 2008 and YouTube started in, I think, 2005. So I was not at the very beginning, but I was pretty close to the early stages. And YouTube, for the people out there, I'm not trying to be mean or rude or anything. I'm just going to explain something to your audience really quick. For all the people that complain about YouTube being censor happy and just, you know, ban happy and shadow ban happy and all of that, you people are so privileged right now to not have lived through what it was like back in 2008 on YouTube, where no matter, you could have your own original song that you wrote in your own house with your microphone that sounds nothing like any other song, and all of a sudden you would get a copyright strike, no warning, no second chance, no appeal, no nothing from Warner Music Group.
Oh, wow.
There was no appeal process. There was no, hey, you're wrong, that's my song. They would just hit you and that'll be it. And, you know, you get 3 of those and you're dead. And that's how it used to be back then. And then you had, you know, if you had anything that was remotely, if you talked about a Viacom product, you know, like, which would be, who's Viacom? I guess Nickelodeon, maybe Comedy Central, you know, people that, you know, they own all those different stations that aren't like Cartoon Network and stuff, you know, the stuff that Turner owns. I think he owns Cartoon Network. Anyway, point is, if you talked about Viacom shows, you could get banned because Viacom sued YouTube for people putting up full episodes of their stuff.
Yeah.
There was no appeals process. There was nobody made money. No one was a partner either. I mean, like, if you were a partner, you could have 1 million subs and still not become a YouTube partner back then.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had to hand select you. I remember, I don't know if you got Mr. Repsion, which, you know, he's just an example I thought of at the top of my head. Back in the day, I remember him being pretty big because he was having that feud with Onision for a while. And probably 10 years ago. And this is before anybody could become a partner. And I remember hearing him talking about, you know, like, he had over 100,000 subscribers, but they wouldn't, you know, monetize him or give him, you know, in the partner program. I don't think they opened up the partner program to everyone until 2012, where anybody could join. But it used to be very, very, very picky. Like, there was like, you know, sort of like on Twitter, how you can't get a verified check mark unless just, you know, the Holy Ghost finds your profile. That's what it was like on YouTube with the partner program. Nobody made money.
And
unless you're with those multi-channel networks, which, once again, just like traditional publishing and record deals, they screw you.
All right. Well,
that's why they exist. So
I think this is where a good spot to end it. Is there anything else you want to add?
Just check out Terror Tracks if you want to, you know, hear how to write books or listen to me review Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. That's it.
There you go. Go check it out.
That information was awesome. Moving on, we're going to mix the dough with a quote. The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. Stephen McCraney. It's very hard looking at failure just about every time. What I tell myself is that every successful person mentions that they failed tons, and it kind of makes it easier to accept failure. Because I fail, you fail, we all make failures, and it's something we have to accept. I kind of struggle with trying to get things right the first time, which I think is an unhealthy mindset because then you avoid failures or you just get a more negative mindset when you do fail because this wasn't perfect. This wasn't good enough. So that is one of my things that I need to work on. Now, with that in mind, I don't recommend trying to fail either because, I mean, that's obviously going to lead to failure. And you're not really going to be like, yay, I failed. But you should be like, yeah, I failed. That was a weird way to put it, but it's true. Keep moving forward. We also all have our own definition of success. So failure is going to look different from one person to the next. And some people will be like, that's not failure. And you'll be like, yeah, it is. So that's just a factor as well. Too long to listen, make mistakes, live a little, and on to the next segment.
这样的也得，讓我們講 to our next episode.
All right, so this is for a 24-hour VR challenge. I haven't officially decided if I plan on doing this yet, but it is a challenge I am thinking I'm going to do. As of right now, I'm thinking of doing it on July 22nd to 23rd. I would do it around 6 or 7 after I ate dinner on the 22nd, and then just go in for a whole 24 hours. And I'd plan on sleeping with the VR headset on. I don't know, make my own room or something. I just think it would be a cool challenge. Just kind of depends if I'll do it on that date, if my work goes ahead and has the approval for the 23rd being off. So we'll see. I don't really know why I want to try this challenge. I just do. I'm like, that sounds interesting. Let's do it. For the video footage, like camera, I'm thinking I'll do a time lapse because I don't have a webcam and I can't do video footage because that would be too much storage, as well as it's not good for DSLRs to have their sensor open for 24 hours. So that's why I'm thinking I'll go with the time lapse, because you get the idea without the storage hassle, without it being so bad for the camera. I mean, it's still not great for the camera, but it's relatively okay. And it would look cool. And then I'll just do a 24-hour screen recording for the VR footage. I should have enough storage for that. I'll just have to delete it afterwards. And after that, I will edit a video with my thoughts on it, and I think it would be a fun video. And I will not be live streaming because I'll be texting people, look at my email. There's just a lot of stuff that's confidential, and I don't want to really live stream that, you know? So for privacy reasons, it's not being live streamed. Anyways, on to the last piece of dough. All right, the guest in this episode is Jack Pierce from the Charanagoes podcast. There'll be links in the description. Go check him out. My challenge for July is reading a little bit every day. And if you have any ideas for the podcast, just get a hold of me and we can probably talk about them. And if you'd like to be a guest, there'll be a sign-up sheet in the description. As well as if you're wondering what Linguini's dough is, this is where we start with the base piece of dough. And you can really bake you can bake a lot of stuff with dough. And we build from that. We can talk about self-improvement, business, finances, and a lot of the time it's productivity. So that's usually where I try to bake it at. Just kind of depends on the episode. The voice actor in this video is user/Lendry from Reddit, spelled Lendry. Go check him out if you want a reliable voice actor. And the songs in this are Slug Love 87, Go On Going, Charanagoes, Digital Memories, and Witness, all from the YouTube library. Anyways, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next piece of dough.